Hello, everybody. We'll get started in just one moment. Welcome to the Global Action Week for Education Coalition meeting hosted by the Global Campaign for Education US. My name is Jennifer Rigg, and I serve as Executive Director at GCE-US. Please introduce yourselves in the chat box with your name, organizational affiliation, and location. For today's event, we have captioning available in English. For English captions, you can click on the CC at the bottom of the Zoom screen to turn on the subtitles. We want to have as much interaction with all of you as possible throughout the event, and we invite you to pose questions and comments in the Zoom chat box. Today's event will showcase global and youth leaders who are working to ensure the human right to quality, inclusive education for all. We will discuss the barriers and opportunities to advance education, as well as recommendations to take forward. Given that this year's Global Action Week for Education focuses on the right to education, especially in emergency settings, special attention will be given to work to support students living in emergency settings, protected crises, and all types of emergencies around the globe. For participants in the U.S. and with U.S.-based colleagues, we would especially like to encourage you to please take action and contact your members of Congress today when key committees in the House of Representatives are finalizing funding requests right now. You can find resources to engage in legislative advocacy for the reauthorization of the READ Act in the chat box. We would like to introduce you to two wonderful GCE-US student fellows, Parina Anton Lopez and Annie Lynn, who will be co-chairing today's session. Parina is a master's degree student at the Georgetown Walsh School of Foreign Service, where she is also a 2021 USAID Donald M. Payne Fellow. She has worked with the International Rescue Committee to connect unaccompanied youth migrants from Northern Central America with education and trauma support services in the U.S., and previously taught at a teacher training college in Cambodia. She is particularly passionate about advocating for the right to education in emergency settings and equipping students with the social emotional skills needed to succeed in the 21st century. Welcome, Parina. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, for welcoming me to the session, and thank you so much to everyone who is joining our call today. Annie, my co-chair, is also a student fellow with the Global Campaign for Education US, and she's currently a student at George Washington University studying international affairs with a focus in international development and economics. At George Washington University, or GW, Annie has served as a Director of Mentorship and Director of Community Outreach with GW First Gen United. She previously worked with Inkuleko, a nonprofit organization that promotes education access in the township communities of Makanda, South Africa. Annie is especially interested in engaging with GCE-US Coalition members and other advocates to further improve equitable education access for all. Today, we will hear from young activists, NGO representatives, and global leaders in the promotion of education and emergencies around the globe during GCE's Global Action Week for Education. Every year, GCE chapters around the world highlight regional and national priorities focused on an annual theme as we work together in the movement for education for all. This year's theme will be held under GCE's Protect Education and Emergencies Now campaign, with the objective of ensuring that the international community take effective, immediate, and deliberate action to protect the right to transformative, inclusive, and equitable education for students in emergency settings. Globally, 75 million students have had their education disrupted by conflict, and we've come together today to issue a call to action for governments and the donor community to strengthen the access to education for all students, including those who live in conflict and emergency settings. We so look forward to learning from each of you and each person joining us today. So now I would like to introduce a session on the importance of addressing girls' education in emergency settings, given that around 64 million girls and adolescents are living in conflicts, and as many as 20 million girls might never return to school as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. So this session will specifically focus on the role of civil society in ensuring that policies prioritize efforts for all girls to access and thrive in education. For this panel, we will be joined by Taibat Hussein and Diana Ayala. Taibat is a senior technical advisor on the Ford Foundation-funded Safe School Movement project, which is a strategic intervention to strengthen CSO capacity to implement recommendations of the 4th International Conference of the Safe Schools Declaration. Diana works with the Foro Dakar Honduras, which is based in Honduras, and also with the Latin American Campaign for the Right to Education, or CLAVE. She is a Global Partnership for Education youth leader and has worked for advocating for girls with disabilities and from rural areas to complete 12 years of school, which is one of the biggest gender equality issues in Honduras. So Taibat, let's start off with you and hear about the work that you're doing to advance girls' education in Nigeria and around the world. And if in your discussion, if you could please also share how we can improve gender inclusive perspectives in the planning, budgeting, and implementation of emergency response plans, and especially when it comes to ensuring education in conflicts.
Thank you so much, Pai. Thank you. So I would like to provide a context. As of the beginning of 2020, 935 schools in Northeast Nigeria had been closed due to attacks and conflict. We know that schools are among the worst east when it comes to emergencies, as evidenced by the COVID-19 pandemic, the Boko Haram insurgencies, and the several attacks on Nigerian communities, which have all compounded the problems that many girls face in consistently accessing schooling. Specifically in Nigeria, schoolgirls have been directly attacked due to religious and ideological opposition to girls' education. All this calls for improved education response during emergencies. And in a bid to put into action recommendations from the 4th International Conference on Safe School Declaration, my organization, the Development Research and Project Center, is implementing the Safe School Movement project with funding from the Ford Foundation. This project seeks to support a dynamic collective of civil society organizations to conduct step-down workshops and trainings on the Safe School Declaration and recommendations. We have collaborated with the Nigerian Education in Emergencies Working Group and UNICEF to convene a 3-day step-down training workshop for about 31 civil society organizations across Nigeria to transfer demonstrable skills, knowledge, and practice, and also, to empower the civil society to mount advocacy to their state governments, to the ministries of education, to the agencies on school safety. We have supported the CSO to also implement safe school activities at the community level across the 6 geopolitical zones that we have in the country. This is to increase the skills of, school administrators, community leaders, and parents, because all this group of people have a role to play when we have the issue of conflict, wars, insurgencies, and to also, enhance the capacity of the school stakeholders on school emergency response plan. And this month, we put out a call to, indigenous CSO in the country working on education, most especially girls' education, to apply for our training and also small grants to carry out, safe school activities at the grassroots level, and also to implement the recently launched national policy on safe, security, and violence-free schools in the country. This is our own way as an organization of ensuring that these policies are not just policies, but they are well actioned, and making sure that schools are safe for all, especially for girls, so that their education can continue even during emergencies. We understand the issue clearly based on the data available, and we as an organization, we are solving it sustainably through the power of collaboration and integrating, local actors, getting the buy-in and commitment of the grassroots CSOs, community leaders, religious leaders, and the parents. In terms of how can we improve gender perspective, we know that it is important to proactively integrate an inclusive and gender responsive perspectives when it comes to planning, budgeting, and implementation of any emergency response plan. And we're doing this just to ensure that the most vulnerable, especially the girls, can continue to learn even at the time of this crisis. For instance, in Nigeria, I know that we have the Education in Emergency Working Group to coordinate, equitable deployment of education resources for populations affected by this crisis. Their focus, however, is mostly in the Northeast region of the country. But we must begin to shift from just children affected by war, attacks, and insurgencies in one region to actually developing an holistic plan that addresses all forms of emergencies, just like the mental health, everything that's just been mentioned across the country. Also, I believe it is important to ensure that the participation of girls and young women in the decision-making areas tied to education, because this affects them. So they must be involved. We must get them involved. Also critical is, involving communities and the parents to ensure that most of these vulnerable children have access to education in emergencies interventions, particularly in the remote and marginalized areas. Failure to incorporate a gender-responsive approach into any education in emergency plans as a high cost, not just for these girls, but for the policymakers, for the communities and the development actors. Okay, so I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Taibat, for your insightful presentation. You are really, truly an example for youth education and gender equality champions everywhere, and the work that you do in Nigeria, but also as an advocate, as a global advocate, is so important to support girls' education. I'd like to ask you a quick question, and we'll keep this to 1 to 2 minutes if you can, on how we can ensure and how civil societies organizations can ensure that the implementation of emergency response plans are gender inclusive and transformative. I think you're muted, Taibat.
Okay, so thank you very much. Like I said, the government has a lot to do, but most importantly, the civil society has a lot to do. And like Yasmin has said, the girls are the most affected by conflict, by insurgencies. So whenever it comes to, education in emergency interventions, we must begin to apply a gender lens. We must begin to be considerate of how this issue affects the girls. We know that the girls are already facing a huge barrier to their education, even without the emergency. We have the cultural norms, the social barrier, the ideological barrier to girls accessing education, which is worsened by crisis, by insurgency. So as civil society organization, we must come together. We must pool resources together. And that is why the Safe School Movement project is very critical at this point, because we are mobilizing this group of CSO in a strategic way and training them to provide step-down training to these schools in the community to prepare them for cases of attacks and insurgencies, because these are very common in Nigeria, especially in the Northeast. So we're coming together to pool resources together, to mobilize ourselves together, to understand what are the emergency response plans we have on ground, what are the policies on ground, what are the recommendations, and begin to translate these recommendations into action. So I believe when we're doing that, we should also be conscious of, how this crisis affect the different gender, and take a gender lens, a gender responsive and a gender sensitive approach to any interventions and programs that we might be developing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Taibat. It's really a testament to the importance of collective action and the impact that can have.